One of the most interesting experiences a person can have, and it's typical of modern, well-developed, affluent societies, is this experience called burnout. It's also called depletion or breakdown. So I used to use the word broken when I went through my own experience. I used to write on my journal and talk to people, and I would say, look, I feel that something broke within me, but I don't know what it is, so I can't fix it. It's like a machine broke down, a screw is loose, but I don't know which screw it is, so I cannot go tighten it, And I knew that something had snapped, but I didn't know what it was, so I couldn't fix it. And that gave me, particularly because I had already been a therapist for over 20 years, and I had helped already by then thousands of people. So there was a certain degree of what I now recognize to be perhaps arrogance. I thought I could do anything, I could fix any problem, I could help anyone. Well, when that happened, I was not able to help myself, and I felt quite broken. It's interesting because I kept teaching and doing therapy. Later, during the pandemic started, and I got a job as an engineer, and I did my job. I started off as an assistant engineer. I intended to stay there for only 6 months during the pandemic. The pandemic got extended, and I got COVID, was hospitalized, almost died. That's a different story. So I ended up staying for 2 years, but during those 2 years, I went from assistant engineer to chief of engineering. And what's interesting, I'm only telling you this information because from the outside, when I was at the peak of this breakdown experience, people, when they would hear me later talk about burnout or breakdown or depletion, they would say, dude, I wouldn't be able to tell. I remember when I was teaching philosophy and people later found out what happened, they would tell me I could not believe what I heard, because every single night you stood up for 3-4 hours and you taught like the best classes ever, like nobody could ever see. But inside, I was broken and depleted. So what's really awesome about this is this. When that happened, because I had been a therapist already for so many years, I had been to a bunch of conferences, I had published extensively, I knew a bunch of people in the business. And to be frank, I knew the best of the best, because when you go to these conferences, you meet the top people in the business. So I called them up. I called about 15 different therapists, and I do still believe that they're awesome, but I couldn't get the right kind of help. I couldn't get what I needed at that time. Now, let's be frank, let me be really specific here. I couldn't even articulate my need. So I'm not blaming the therapists, but I didn't even know what I needed. But somehow I expected my therapists to know what I needed, and they didn't, and I couldn't get much relief. Some of these therapists were, and I write about this in several books and everything else, because it's sad. Some of them were borderline, they were not very good at their job. Sometimes a person speaks at a conference and they wear a really nice tie, but when you go to their office, it's like there's something missing there. There's a connection, there's an empathy that's missing. I don't know why, but not everybody, and I guess I do know why. That empathy, that connection comes from two things. It comes from the heart, not from the mind. So you can read a bunch of books and you can be really smart and a really good business person and make a ton of money in therapy, but if the heart of yours is not in the right place, the client who's suffering is going to feel that something is missing, that connection, that empathy is missing. So I thought before my own breakdown that my heart was open and that I cared, and that's what people told me. So they fed back to me that idea that I was doing great and so forth. But when I went through my own experience and began to recover, I realized, gosh, looking back, I was lousy. So much was missing from my practice. Because once your heart opens, you see life from a much broader perspective and you understand so much more that I didn't then. And so, of course, from this new perspective, we realize that the old perspective was really lacking, was really, it was really short, was really small as compared to what I see today. So today I can help people much more effectively. We can do in one session what, and this is an experience that I've had over the years, We used to take 3 sessions to accomplish what I can now do in one session, and that same level of improvement has happened throughout these 25 years. Now we can do way more in a shorter period of time because the techniques are much more objective, and also my ability to understand the person apparently has shifted a little, which I'm really grateful for. But what happens to a person when they break down? With the sense of depletion, if you have been there, you don't need an explanation, because you feel that your life is over. You feel a profound sense of nostalgia and a longing for a past that is dead. Now, that past may include a loved one who died. It may include a profound and huge financial ruin, like you lost everything. It could be a massive health diagnosis. You have a couple months to live according to your doctor. It could be a breakup, a severe breakup. Usually when a couple grows up and they decide to not be together anymore, and they're both adults and they're both quote-unquote normal people, separation can happen, and it can be very difficult, but you don't have this hugely traumatic experience. Many of you may have watched on the news and the social media the Johnny Depp trial, and you have all of these false accusations and the police and violence and take the kids away and all of this mess, right? And I'm not here to diagnose or judge any of those people. What I'm explaining to you is that normal people don't separate like that. Normal people, they can hurt. Look, this is not what I wanted. I want to continue with you, whatever, but all right, if you don't want to be with me, we're going to have to adapt, give me some time to get used to this new reality. Let me see the kids. Please don't steal all of my belongings, Let me retrieve my things from the house, and we can continue supporting one another insofar as raising the kids and that kind of thing. That's what normal people do. But sometimes a breakup, and the term that I use is separation versus breakup. Sometimes the separation can be very violent, and we call it a breakup because something breaks. One of the two people will break down. The other person is typically, if you notice, whenever one person is really broken, the other person is really happy. Pay attention to this. Not just in the movies, in real life. There's one person broken, depleted, my gosh, I can't believe. The other person's already married to somebody else a day after you left. It's like, it's really weird. You wonder, were they together before? Like, what the heck is this, right? And if you ever say to them, look, I'm having a hard time adjusting to the fact that just yesterday we were married. Now, I cannot even get my own things out of the house. This is a little weird. They say, you see, you're codependent. You see, you're jealous of my happiness. You see, because that type of person is always gaslighting you. And so when you separate from that, it's tough, man. Something snaps inside of you. I've been there. And there are several experts on YouTube on narcissism, several people. Rebecca Zung is an attorney who represents essentially victims of narcissistic, people who are really troubled in their heads, and she has a whole channel on this topic. I really enjoy her videos, learned a lot from her. But there are many, many, many. Dr. Les Carter is another one that comes to mind. Learned a whole bunch from him. Dr. Ramada, and there are a number of experts, people who make a living studying these things, and they'll tell you the narcissist has, it is a special breed of people. I was studying, when I was in my own recovery, I was studying about that because I was in that situation, and there was this expert, I forgot his name right now, he's out of Spain, and he's a world-renowned expert on narcissism and psychopaths. And he says, look, if you meet one of those people, they all have one thing in common. They're very charming at first. And so they seduce you, not just seduce you like sexually, they seduce you because they're very charming, they're very polite, and they're very loving. So in the narcissistic community, we talk about love bombing, And if you have a little bit of self-love deficiency or deficit, as Dr. I forgot his name now teaches, if we have the self-love deficiency, when a narcissist meets you and likes you and targets you for destruction, they love bomb you. They love you so much. You're so perfect, and that soothes your soul. And so you fall for that. So this expert out of Spain says, look, if you meet a person like that absolutely adores you, you're completely perfect no matter what, that's a narcissist, that's a psychopath. And he says it's so funny, I love the way he says the first thing you do is you get your best running shoes on and you run as fast as you can. Don't ever turn back, don't ever look back, because if you stay, the person will suck you dry, destroy you, and most likely will end up dead. It's a very sad thing to say, but it is true. So yeah, a romantic breakup with somebody who's a psychopath, and there are way more of them than we realize, is something that will leave a person broken, depleted, in burnout mode. It's very difficult to recover from that. I talk about this in one of my books. I was at a conference once, in the midst of my own crisis. And I have another therapist who I considered a friend of mine, and someone I see 2-3 times a year in different conferences. But every time we get together, it's like the feeling of warmth, such a nice person, a great therapist. And it always felt to me like we've been friends our whole lives. And, so we would talk about, catch up a little bit, and I wouldn't see him for 6-9 months, maybe a year later, but then we would get together again. It was like so awesome. Right? So I consider him a friend. And when I was in the midst of this, we were at this conference once, and we were at this pool party doing s'mores, and I woke up to him and he says, dude, I heard he told me, I had done a lecture that day, and I talk about this story in a different book, and I say that when I got to the conference, I had forgotten what my lecture would be about, because I proposed the topic and I wrote to the conference organizers before the breakdown. So between being accepted as a presenter and the day of the conference, I had a problem in my life that resulted in some sort of breakdown, or I couldn't sleep, and I was really disturbed, right? So I forgot all about it, but I went to the conference. So I get there, pick up a conference brochure, and they put your picture and they list your topic of conference. So I'm reading about it, what it says about me and what my conference would be about. And I remember, okay, I think I know what I'm talking about. So when my time comes, I get up there, I have no notes, no audio visuals, no movies, no pictures, nothing, just me. And I get up there and I share a little bit of what I thought of how to use certain principles from A Course in Miracles in therapy. That's the topic that I had proposed. And, with no preparation that I could remember, I simply explained what I thought about that topic. Now, mind you, this is a room full of therapists, about 100 therapists there, who are all experts. They're at this conference, they're all therapists. It's very different speaking to a group of therapists as it is to the public, because then you get a mixed crowd and some people may not know anything about what you're saying. It's a little bit easier to impress them in some ways, that's the truth. But when you're talking at a conference and everybody there is an expert better than you, it's like, it's not so easy to impress them, and you can't say something that's weird or wrong, they all catch you. It's like, it's just not, it's a bit more tricky. You have to be on top of your game. So I do this talk, and I'm convinced that they'll never invite me again, right? Because they have, at the end of every talk, every participant, every member of the audience votes, gives you like a score essentially. So I'm thinking I'm getting like a 0. I don't even know what I was talking about, But when I was done, you have to vacate the podium because the next speaker has to jump on. So I go to the lobby in this hotel, and crowd follows me. They wanted to know more about this and more about that, and we were talking. It was kind of an interesting opportunity for me because I felt so depleted back then. And about 3 weeks later, I get my scorecard, 10 out of 10. They wanted me back, and I was like, wait, obviously they sent me the wrong scorecard, But those are the kinds of things that happen because since my mind was so broken, I was able to speak from my heart, and people somehow connected to that. But the point is that when I go to this evening pool party and we're doing the s'mores, this friend of mine that I'm telling you about approaches me and says, yeah, I heard your talk was fantastic. Everybody's been talking about this. And I said, dude, since we're friends, I said, dude, you're not going to believe it. I don't even know what I said. I'm so, and then I told him what was going on in my life, my personal life. So he's listening, very empathetic, very nice man, he's listening to me. And he says, well, let me tell you a story. I had a similar experience about 25 years ago. And there isn't a day in my life that I don't feel that pain. And the point of what I'm telling you right now is that it's very easy to learn to suppress what's going on, put a veneer of decency on top of our behaviors, move on with our lives, but the pain remains inside. I did not accept the future for myself. I said, no way, I'm not going to live that way. I want to cure, I want to heal the pain. I'm not going to live pretending, fake until you make it, pretend you're okay, move on with your life. No, I wanted to heal the pain. I wanted to understand the pain. I wanted to heal it. And so it took me a little bit longer. When the breakup first happened, I consulted one expert and I asked him how long he thought it would take, given the situation that I was presenting, whatever, in his experience, super experienced therapist, how long would it take, I asked him, to recover from something like this. By the way, the recovery has nothing to do with not being in the relationship. In this particular case, I was the one who walked out, I was the one who filed for divorce, I was in an abusive relationship. And when you're in an abusive relationship, you're going to something that they call Stockholm syndrome, and you believe that you love this person and you cannot live without them, and you create all these confusions in your mind, and it stems from childhood, with physical abuse in childhood, and you love your parents. It's a complex thing that happened there. So eventually, for me, being able to walk out and file for divorce was a huge victory, because prior to that, I couldn't even conceive of being away from this person. So eventually I was strong enough to say, enough abuse, I'm out of here. That was a huge step forward. So the breakdown had nothing to do with the absence of the person in my life. The breakdown in my case had to do with a sense of betrayal. And I'll tell you more about that later, not to deviate too much. But I just want to convey to you the fact that if you are in this situation, I get you, been there, done that. This guy told me, to go back to the story, that it would take me 7 years to recover. And I said, hell no, I'm not going to be in this state for 7 years. Hell no. And I'm happy to report to you that I beat the odds by several years, because I worked day and night on this. And it was not easy because the mind is broken. And so what the mind wants, it's like a drug addict. The drug is bad for you, but you want to go back into the past. In my case, I didn't want the person because I knew how toxic it was, but I kept thinking about the past. This happened, that happened, this was unfair, and that thinking kept creating similar events in my present. So I got into another relationship, the same thing happened. Of course, I was recreating that over and over, right? And eventually we snap out of that and begin to create a new future legitimately, but there has to be a healing within there. All I'm trying to tell you here is that burnout, in my experience, can happen as a result of a bad breakup, major health diagnosis, financial ruin, you're done, and or the death of a loved one. So especially like unexpected death of a loved one, very difficult. I worked with a mother once who was in complete burnout, and the daughter had liver failure, and they used to go to the doctor, and the doctor used to say, look, there's nothing we can do for her. This is complete liver failure. It's a progressive illness, and she has 6 months to live. Arrange your affairs. There's nothing that can be done. This, of course, was many years ago. It's possible. Medicine has advanced so much. It's possible that nowadays they would have done something different. Not back then. Well, this mother went shopping for a casket with the daughter, a casket for the daughter with the daughter. It's like and on and on and on. So, and it was a relative, was a 32-year-old young woman, and it was just such a weird thing, right? And she accepted the doctor's verdict. Yeah, she's going to die, make preparations. And so mother and daughter used to go shopping for funeral supplies with the daughter, for the daughter's funeral. And, it's our experiences can be so, when we look back at those things, it's like, did we really do that, right? But this is what this lady lived through. And then when she comes to the office after the daughter passed away, our job is to pick up the pieces and somehow build a life for her. And that's exactly what we do, right? Where do you start? It's a lengthy process. Incidentally, this hybrid program that I have is a good place to start. We do one session together, private session, but then you get in a group program where we discuss these things and I talk and I do, it's all with me. I don't have any assistants. I do all of the work. And I find that an important piece of what I do, because I've been to many other programs where you have like some sort of senior therapist essentially selling programs, and then you have a bunch of students essentially actually coaching you. And I've been to a ton of those. Finally, I learned my lesson. And now when I look at a new program, I ask, okay, who exactly is the coach in this program? And it's never the person selling it. In my case, it's me. I do the coaching, I do the therapy, I do it all myself. I don't want to do it any other way. People tell me, yeah, you can make more money. It's not why I do what I do. It's not why I do this. I do this because I want to do it. I want to do the work. I want to be there with you. I want to look into your eyes when you cry or when you smile. I want to be there. I've been there. I want to be there with you. So all of this coaching I do it myself. And it's a very effective way to do it, because the group, I'm there of course, but the group helps one another. I used to think that groups were distracting and that we wouldn't get as much done. But I learned that it's actually much more powerful, because we help one another and there's an energy there that gets everybody to elevate. And we work a lot on this energy, the field and group consciousness, so that we create a vortex essentially, like Abraham Hicks says, we create a vortex, essentially tap into this vortex where everybody is helped. Burnout is tough, I'll tell you. The average person doesn't recover. The average person spends the rest of their life post-burnout looking at the wall and crying. They do not recover. I did, and many people do. The people I work with do recover. But I don't think that we recover. I don't think that that's the correct word. There's no way to recover, I should say. We cannot go back and rebuild our lives. That life is over. If you're in true burnout, that life is over. What we learn to do is build a brand new life, a much better life. And it turns out to be the life that you really wanted to have lived, but before you couldn't. Because you're so attached and there are so many commitments, you couldn't really live the life you wanted. Once it's all burnt out, you essentially have nothing to lose. So then you begin to ask yourself, but what is the life I really want to live? And then you begin to build that life. So although it's a very painful experience, it's also the best thing that will ever happen to you. All right? If you have any questions or thoughts on this, let me know so that we can enter into a dialogue and go from there. Blessings.